The autumn wind carried the scent of burning timber and something far worse across the Nebraska plains in 1876. Sarah Mackenzie lay face down in the dirt behind a destroyed trading post, blood pooling beneath her head, her breathing shallow and barely audible.
The gang of outlaws who had just ransacked her store were already miles away, confident they had left no witnesses to their brutal crime. They had taken everything of value, burned what they couldn't carry, and beaten the young woman unconscious when she tried to protect her livelihood.
What those ruthless men didn't know was that Sarah Mackenzie wasn't just any frontier trader. She wasn't some helpless settler trying to make a living on the edge of civilization. The blood that now stained the Nebraska soil belonged to the sister of Sitting Bull's most trusted war chief, a woman whose Lakota name meant, "She who brings justice." Her brother, who had earned his place at the great chief's side through countless battles and unwavering loyalty to his people, was currently leading 300 Sioux warriors back from a successful hunt just 20 miles north. The outlaws had made the worst mistake of their lives. They had declared war on the wrong family. Sarah Mackenzie had always known this day might come. Living alone on the frontier, running a trading post at the crossroads between white settlements and Native American territory, carried risks that most women would never dare to face. But Sarah wasn't most women. At 28 years old, she had survived things that would have broken stronger people, and she had built something remarkable in this harsh landscape. The Mackenzie trading post sat like a small fortress on the Nebraska plains, its thick log walls weathered but sturdy, smoke rising steadily from the stone chimney, even on this crisp October morning. Sarah had built this place with her own hands over the past 5 years, transforming what had once been nothing more than a way station into the most successful trading operation within 100 miles. Travelers, settlers, and Native American tribes alike knew they could find fair deals and honest treatment at Sarah's establishment. She stood behind her wooden counter, carefully organizing the new shipment of goods that had arrived just 2 days earlier. Bolts of colorful fabric, steel knives, coffee beans, sugar, ammunition, and dozens of other items filled the shelves and storage areas. The morning light filtered through the small windows, casting long shadows across the packed earth floor. Everything was exactly as it should be, peaceful and orderly. Sarah had learned to read the signs of trouble long ago. The way horses moved when their riders were tense. The particular silence that fell over the prairie when danger approached. The feeling in the air that made her hand drift unconsciously toward the loaded rifle she kept behind the counter. But this morning, those warning signs came too late. The sound of approaching hoofbeats reached her ears just moments before 6 men burst through her front door without bothering to knock. They moved with the aggressive confidence of people who took what they wanted and answered to no one. Their leader was a tall man with a scarred face and cold gray eyes that seemed to catalogue everything in the store within seconds. The others spread out immediately, cutting off any escape routes and positioning themselves to grab whatever caught their interest. Well, the leader said, his voice carrying a mocking tone that made Sarah's skin crawl. Looks like we found ourselves a little gold mine out here in the middle of nowhere. His gaze fixed on Sarah with the predatory intensity of a wolf studying wounded prey.
You must be doing pretty well for yourself, lady.
This place is packed with good stuff. Sarah kept her expression calm, though her heart was beginning to race. She had dealt with difficult customers before, men who thought a woman alone was easy prey. Most of them could be handled with firm words and a visible weapon. But these men were different. The way they moved, the casual violence in their postures, the complete lack of respect or hesitation in their actions. These weren't just rough customers. These were killers. Gentlemen, she said, her voice steady despite the fear beginning to build in her chest. You're welcome to browse my goods and make purchases like any other customers. I have fair prices and quality merchandise. But I'll ask you to show proper respect for my establishment. The leader laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth or humor. Purchases? He stepped closer to the counter, leaning forward until Sarah could smell the whiskey on his breath and see the dried blood under his fingernails.
Lady, I think you misunderstood the situation here.
We ain't customers, we're taking what we want, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. The other men began moving through the store with purpose now, grabbing items and stuffing them into large canvas bags they had brought with them. Sarah watched as months of careful inventory management and hard-earned profit disappeared into their greedy hands. One man swept an entire shelf of ammunition into his bag. Another grabbed several of her finest knives and a beautiful set of silver jewelry she had been saving for a special customer. Stop, Sarah said, her voice stronger now, anger beginning to override her fear. This is my livelihood. I've worked for years to build this business. You can't just take everything I have. The leader's expression darkened.
Can't? He reached across the counter quick as a striking snake and grabbed Sarah by the front of her dress, yanking her forward until their faces were inches apart.
Lady, you better learn real quick that there ain't no law out here, except what we make.
And right now, we're making the law that says everything in this store belongs to us. Sarah tried to pull free, but his grip was iron strong. She could see the madness lurking behind his eyes, the complete absence of anything resembling human decency. These men hadn't just stumbled across her trading post by accident. They had come here specifically to rob her, probably after hearing stories about her success from other travelers. Please, she said, trying a different approach. Take what you need, but leave me enough to survive the winter. I have connections with many tribes in this area. If you treat me fairly, I can help you trade with them. I can make you more money than you'll get from just robbing me once. The leader considered this for a moment, his head tilted to one side like a curious animal. Then he smiled, and that smile was more terrifying than any threat. Tribes, huh? You got yourself some Indian friends? He released her so suddenly she stumbled backwards. Boys, did you hear that? This lady thinks she's got protection from the savages. The other men laughed, harsh sounds that echoed off the walls of the trading post. One of them, a fat man with a greasy beard, looked up from stuffing coffee beans into his bag. Maybe we ought to take her with us, boss. Could be useful to have someone who speaks their language. Nah, the leader said, never taking his eyes off Sarah. Too much trouble. Besides, I got a feeling our lady friend here might not be as cooperative as she's pretending to be. He gestured toward the rifle she kept behind the counter. You were thinking about reaching for that gun, weren't you, lady? Thinking maybe you could shoot your way out of this? Sarah said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. The leader nodded approvingly. Smart woman. Stupid, but smart. You know that gun wouldn't save you, but you were willing to try anyway. I respect that kind of fighting spirit. Too bad it ain't gonna do you no good. The robbery continued for another hour, with the men systematically looting everything of value they could carry. They took her entire stock of weapons and ammunition, all her coffee and sugar, the best fabrics, tools, jewelry, and even the small amount of cash she kept hidden behind a loose board in the wall. They knew exactly where to look for hidden valuables, confirming Sarah's suspicion that they had been watching her establishment for some time. As they worked, the men talked among themselves with casual brutality about their future plans. They mentioned other trading posts and settlements they intended to hit, innocent families they would rob and possibly kill. Sarah listened with growing horror, realizing that she wasn't their first victim and wouldn't be their last if they were allowed to continue their rampage across the frontier. Boss, one of the younger men said as they neared the end of their looting, what do we do about her? He nodded toward Sarah, who was still standing behind her now empty counter, watching them destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. The leader looked at Sarah thoughtfully, as if considering several unpleasant options. Well, we can't just leave her here to run off and tell the cavalry about us. And we can't take her with us. He shrugged, his expression becoming almost apologetic. Sorry, lady. Nothing personal, but business is business. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she realized what he meant. These men weren't just going to rob her and leave. They were going to kill her. She thought quickly, desperately searching for any option that might save her life. The rifle behind the counter was too far away. The back door was blocked by two of the gang members. There was nowhere to run, and no one coming to help her. Wait, she said, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. You said you respect fighting spirit. Give me a chance to earn my life. One fair fight. Me against your smallest man. If I win, you leave me alive. If I lose, at least I go down fighting. The leader stared at her for a long moment, then burst into laughter. Lady, you got more guts than sense. I'll give you that. He looked around at his men, all of whom were grinning now. You hear that, boys? The lady wants to fight for her life. Come on, boss, the fat man said. Let's just get this over with. We got a long ride ahead of us. But the leader held up a hand. No, I like this idea. It's been a while since we had some entertainment. He turned back to Sarah. Tell you what, lady. You can fight, but not against my smallest man. You fight me. And when I win, which I will, I promise to make it quick and clean. That's more mercy than most folks get from us. Sarah knew she had no real choice. Even if she somehow managed to defeat this man in a fight, the others would just kill her anyway. But at least this way she might buy herself a few more minutes of life. Maybe something would happen. Maybe help would arrive. Maybe she could find an opportunity to escape during the confusion of the fight. Agreed, she said, stepping out from behind the counter. The leader grinned and began removing his gun belt and jacket. Boys, clear some space. This is going to be fun. The other men quickly moved furniture and merchandise out of the way, creating an open area in the center of the trading post floor. They were all smiling now, anticipating the entertainment of watching their boss beat a woman to death. Sarah tried to prepare herself mentally for what was coming. She was strong from years of frontier life, and she knew how to fight. Her brother had taught her some basic combat techniques when they were children, before their paths had diverged so dramatically. But she was also realistic about her chances against a man who probably outweighed her by 80 pounds and had clearly spent years living by violence. The fight began suddenly, with the leader charging forward like a bull. Sarah managed to dodge his first attack, using his momentum against him to send him stumbling past her into a pile of empty crates. The watching men cheered and laughed, enjoying the unexpected show of resistance. For a few minutes, Sarah managed to hold her own. She was faster than her opponent, able to dart in and land quick strikes before dancing back out of his reach. But she couldn't do any real damage, and she knew that all he needed was one good hit to end the fight. Her strategy was simply to survive as long as possible and hope for a miracle. The miracle never came. Eventually, the leader's superior strength and reach began to tell. He caught Sarah with a backhand blow that sent her reeling into the wall, then followed up with a punch to her stomach that doubled her over, gasping for air. The watching men cheered louder, sensing that the entertainment was reaching its climax. "Not bad, lady," the leader said, breathing hard but smiling. "You lasted longer than I expected. Time to finish this." Sarah tried to stand up straight, tried to prepare for one last desperate attack, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The blow to her stomach had knocked the wind out of her, and the hit to her head had left her dizzy and disoriented. She could only watch helplessly as the leader approached for the killing blow. That was when he picked up one of her own heavy iron tools from behind the counter and raised it above her head. Like I said, nothing personal. The world exploded into pain and darkness as the iron bar connected with Sarah's skull. She felt herself falling, felt the warm spread of blood across her face, but consciousness was already slipping away. The last thing she heard was the leader's voice, sounding strangely distant. "Burn it down, boys." Let's make sure nobody finds anything useful here. As Sarah fell into unconsciousness, the gang members began their final act of destruction, setting fire to her trading post and everything in it that they couldn't carry. They never bothered to check whether she was actually dead, assuming that the massive head wound would finish the job even if their initial attack hadn't killed her immediately. They rode away into the gathering dusk, their saddlebags heavy with stolen goods, and their minds already focused on their next target. Behind them, the Mackenzie trading post burned like a funeral pyre, sending a column of black smoke high into the evening sky. And somewhere in that smoke and flame, Sarah Mackenzie lay dying in the dirt, blood pooling beneath her head, her breathing growing shallower with each passing moment. But Sarah Mackenzie had survived worse things than this. And unbeknownst to the gang of outlaws riding away into the distance, their casual act of brutality had just signed their own death warrants. The smoke from the burning trading post was visible for miles across the prairie, and it would soon catch the attention of someone who would not take kindly to seeing his sister's life work destroyed and her blood spilled on the ground. The outlaws had made their worst and final mistake. They had attacked the wrong woman. 20 miles north of the burning trading post, Joseph Mackenzie rode at the head of a hunting party that had been gone from their village for nearly 2 weeks. But Joseph Mackenzie was no longer the name by which most people knew him. For the past 15 years, he had been called Matonajin, Standing Bear, a name he had earned through courage, wisdom, and unwavering loyalty to the Lakota people who had become his true family. The transformation from white settler's son to respected war chief had been neither easy nor quick. When Joseph was 16 and Sarah only 14, their parents had been killed in a wagon accident while crossing a swollen river during their journey west. The two siblings had been rescued by a Lakota hunting party, led by a chief named Iron Hawk, who had taken pity on the orphaned children and brought them back to his village rather than leaving them to die alone on the prairie. Sarah had eventually chosen to return to the white world, using the skills and connections she had gained during her time with the Lakota to establish her trading post as a bridge between two cultures. But Joseph had found something among the Lakota that he had never experienced in white society, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of being truly valued for who he was rather than what he owned or where he came from. Over the years, he had proven himself in hunt after hunt, battle after battle, gradually earning the respect of warriors who had initially viewed him with suspicion and hostility. His white heritage had actually become an advantage in many situations, allowing him to understand the thinking and tactics of cavalry units and civilian militias in ways that purely Lakota warriors sometimes could not. When Sitting Bull had begun gathering tribes for what would become the Great Sioux War, Iron Hawk had personally recommended Mato Najin as one of his most trusted lieutenants. Now, as the hunting party moved across the darkening prairie with nearly 300 pounds of fresh buffalo meat packed on travois behind them, Standing Bear felt the deep satisfaction of a successful expedition. The hunt had been better than anyone had dared hope. The massive herd they had tracked for 6 days had provided enough meat to feed their village through the coming winter, with surplus to trade with neighboring bands. The warriors riding with him were in high spirits, laughing and telling stories as they traveled. These men had become his brothers in every way that mattered. They had saved his life in battle more times than he could count, and he had done the same for them. They trusted him completely, following his orders without question, even when those orders led them into terrible danger. Young Crow Feather, barely 18, but already showing the makings of a fine warrior, rode up beside Standing Bear as they crested a low hill. "War Chief," he said, using the formal title that Standing Bear had earned through years of successful leadership. "I can see smoke ahead, a large fire, maybe 10 miles south." Standing Bear's eyes followed Crow Feather's pointing finger, and immediately his blood turned cold. The thick column of black smoke was rising from exactly the area where Sarah's trading post was located. In all the years since she had established her business, he had never seen smoke like that coming from her direction. Sarah was careful about fire, understanding the dangers it posed on the dry prairie. She would never create a blaze large enough to produce that kind of smoke, unless something was terribly wrong. "Fast Elk," Standing Bear called to one of his most experienced scouts. "Take 2 men and ride ahead to investigate that smoke. But be careful. Stay hidden and observe before you approach. Report back to me as soon as you know what's happening." Fast Elk nodded grimly and selected 2 companions before spurring his horse forward. The 3 scouts quickly disappeared over the next ridge, riding hard toward the source of the smoke. Standing Bear continued leading the main party forward, but his mind was no longer on the successful hunt or the approaching winter. Something was very wrong, and every instinct he had developed over 15 years of warfare was telling him that Sarah was in danger. The hunting party had covered perhaps 3 more miles when Fast Elk came racing back, his horse lathered with sweat and his face grim with terrible news. He pulled up beside Standing Bear, breathing hard from the desperate ride. "War Chief," he gasped, "the trading post is destroyed, burned to the ground. I saw a woman lying in the dirt near the ruins. I think it's your sister. She's not moving, and there's blood on the ground around her." Standing Bear felt something cold and terrible settle in his chest. For a moment, the world around him seemed to slow down, the sounds of the hunting party fading into background noise as his mind processed what Fast Elk had told him. Sarah, his little sister who had built something beautiful out of nothing, who had created a place of peace and prosperity in the middle of a violent frontier, was lying motionless in the dirt while her life's work burned around her. "How many attackers?" Standing Bear asked, his voice deadly calm in the way that his warriors had learned to recognize as a sign of extreme danger. "Unknown, War Chief. But from the tracks around the trading post, I would say at least 5 or 6 mounted men. They rode west after the attack, probably no more than 2 or 3 hours ago." Standing Bear looked around at his hunting party, seeing his own anger and determination reflected in the faces of men who had come to love and respect Sarah almost as much as he did. She had always been kind to them when they visited her trading post, treating them with the same courtesy and fairness she showed to white customers. She had never tried to cheat them or take advantage of their limited understanding of white man's currency. In return, they had appointed themselves her unofficial protectors, though they had never imagined that protection would be needed against such a brutal attack. Iron Hawk, Standing Bear called to his second-in-command. "Take half the hunting party and escort the meat back to the village. Tell the chiefs what has happened here. Tell them that I will return when justice has been served." Iron Hawk, a grizzled veteran of countless battles, nodded his understanding. "And the other half of the men? They ride with me. We're going to find the men who did this, and we're going to make them pay for what they've done." The hunting party quickly divided itself according to Standing Bear's orders. 15 warriors volunteered to continue with him, each man checking his weapons and preparing for what they knew would be a fight to the death. These were not men who gave quarter to enemies, especially enemies who made war on defenseless women. As the 2 groups separated, Standing Bear led his chosen warriors toward the smoking ruins of Sarah's trading post, his mind already focused on the task ahead. He had learned long ago to put aside personal emotions during times of crisis, to think clearly and strategically even when his heart was breaking. But beneath that professional calm, a terrible rage was building, the kind of cold, focused anger that had made him one of the most feared war chiefs on the Great Plains. The scene that greeted them at the trading post was even worse than Fast Elk's report had suggested. The buildings that Sarah had spent years constructing were nothing but smoldering ruins, with only the stone foundation and chimney still standing. Her carefully organized inventory was scattered and burned, creating a wasteland where once there had been order and prosperity. And there, lying face down in the dirt 20 yards from the destroyed main building, was Sarah herself. Standing Bear dismounted and ran to his sister's side, his heart pounding with fear that he might be too late. But as he gently turned her over, he felt a surge of relief that nearly brought tears to his eyes. She was still breathing, though barely. Blood matted her hair and covered one side of her face, and her pulse was weak and irregular, but she was alive. "Quick Knife," he called to the group's medicine man. "Help me with her. She's badly hurt." Quick Knife, who had learned healing arts from his grandmother before becoming a warrior, quickly examined Sarah's injuries. The head wound was serious, but not necessarily fatal if treated properly. More concerning was the way she remained unconscious despite their efforts to revive her. "She has taken a severe blow to the head," Quick Knife reported. "I can stop the bleeding and clean the wound, but she needs rest and careful watching. Moving her too much could make the injury worse." Standing Bear made his decision immediately. "White Buffalo and Crow Feather, ride back and bring Iron Hawk here with medical supplies and a travois. We'll make camp here tonight and tend to my sister properly." He looked around at the rest of his warriors. "The rest of you spread out and examine every track, every sign left by the attackers. I want to know everything about these men. How many there were, what weapons they carried, which direction they went, what their horses looked like. Everything." While Quick Knife worked to clean and bandage Sarah's head wound, the other warriors conducted a thorough examination of the attack site. They were skilled trackers, men who could read the story of what had happened almost as clearly as if they had witnessed it themselves. Within an hour, they had pieced together a detailed picture of the assault. 6 men on horseback, reported Stone Crow, one of the best trackers in the tribe. They arrived in the afternoon and spent considerable time inside the trading post, probably an hour or more. They took many heavy items, based on how deep their horses' hooves pressed into the ground when they left. They were in no hurry and felt completely safe. "They were organized," added Black Elk, studying scuff marks in the dirt near the main building. "This wasn't a random attack by desperate men. They knew what they were looking for and how to find it. Someone had told them about this place and what was here." Standing Bear absorbed this information while keeping a careful watch on Sarah, whose breathing seemed to be growing slightly stronger as Quick Knife's treatment took effect. The picture emerging from his warrior's investigation was of a professional gang of thieves, men who made their living robbing isolated settlers and trading posts. Such gangs were becoming increasingly common on the frontier, taking advantage of the chaos of the Indian Wars to prey on anyone who couldn't defend themselves effectively. "The tracks lead west toward the Black Hills," Stone Crow continued. "But they're not trying to hide their trail. Either they're supremely confident, or they're not very experienced at avoiding pursuit. Or both," Standing Bear said grimly. "They probably assumed that a lone woman had no connections, no one who would come looking for revenge. They have no idea what they've started." As darkness fell over the prairie, Iron Hawk arrived with additional medical supplies and several more warriors who had insisted on joining the pursuit. They set up a careful guard around the ruined trading post, with sentries posted to watch for any sign that the attackers might return. Standing Bear doubted the gang would come back. They had taken what they wanted and moved on to their next target. But he wasn't taking any chances with his sister's safety. Throughout the long night, Standing Bear maintained his vigil beside Sarah's makeshift bed, holding her hand and speaking quietly to her unconscious form. He told her about the successful hunt, about the warriors who were already swearing mighty oaths of vengeance on her behalf, about how they would track down the men responsible and make them pay for their cruelty. He promised her that justice would be served, that her attackers would suffer far more than they had made her suffer. Near dawn, Sarah's eyes finally fluttered open. For a moment she seemed confused, trying to focus on the painted faces gathered around her. Then recognition dawned, and she managed a weak smile. "Joseph," she whispered, using his birth name for the first time in years. "I knew you would come. I'm here, little sister," he replied, gently squeezing her hand. "You're safe now. Can you tell me what happened?" Who did this to you? Sarah's voice was barely audible, but her words were clear enough for Standing Bear and his warriors to understand the full scope of what had occurred. She described the 6 attackers, their leader with the scarred face and cold gray eyes, their systematic looting of everything she had worked to build. She told them about the casual way they had planned to kill her, the cruel enjoyment they had taken in destroying her livelihood. They spoke of other places they intended to rob, Sarah said, her strength growing slightly as she talked. Other innocent people they planned to hurt. They're not done with their killing, Joseph. They'll continue until someone stops them. Standing Bear listened to his sister's account with growing fury, though he kept his expression calm for her sake. When she finished speaking, he gently helped her drink some water and eat a little food that Quick Knife had prepared. Only then did he stand and address his gathered warriors. My friends, he said formally, you have heard what was done to my sister. You have seen the destruction these dogs left behind. I ask now for your help in tracking them down and bringing them to justice. But I want you to understand, this will not be a quick pursuit. These men have a significant head start, and they are traveling fast. Catching them may take many days, possibly weeks. Any man who wishes to return to the village and his family is free to do so with no shame. Not a single warrior moved. Iron Hawk spoke for all of them. War Chief, your sister is our sister. Your enemies are our enemies. We ride with you until justice is done, no matter how long it takes. Standing Bear felt a surge of gratitude and pride in these men, who had chosen to follow him not out of obligation, but out of genuine love and loyalty. With warriors like these at his side, the gang of murderers and thieves didn't stand a chance. Then we ride within the hour, he announced, and we ride for war. The pursuit began at first light, with Standing Bear leading 15 of the finest warriors on the Great Plains, across terrain that would have challenged even experienced cavalry units. The gang's trail was easy to follow at first. 6 heavily loaded horses moving west at a steady pace, their riders apparently confident that no pursuit would materialize. But Standing Bear and his warriors were not ordinary pursuers, and this would not be an ordinary chase. For 3 days they followed the trail across rolling prairie and through scattered groves of cottonwood trees, stopping only when absolutely necessary to rest their horses or grab a few hours of sleep. The warriors took turns riding point, reading sign and watching for any indication that their quarry might be aware of pursuit. But the gang continued moving in a straight line toward the Black Hills, making no effort to conceal their tracks or take precautions against followers. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Stone Crow returned from a scouting mission with news that brought grim smiles to the faces of the pursuing warriors. They have stopped at Widow's Creek, he reported. I count 6 men and horses camped beside the water, maybe 3 miles ahead. They have posted no sentries and appear to be completely at ease. Standing Bear considered this information carefully. Widow's Creek was well known to him, a reliable water source in an otherwise dry stretch of country, surrounded by good grazing for horses. It was exactly the kind of place where confident men might decide to rest for a day or two before continuing their journey. The gang's casual attitude suggested they had no idea they were being pursued by anyone, much less by a war party of experienced Lakota fighters. How's the terrain around their camp? Standing Bear asked. Favorable for us, Stone Crow replied. The creek runs through a shallow valley with good cover on both sides. We could surround them easily without being seen. But War Chief, there is something else you should know. Standing Bear waited, sensing that Stone Crow had discovered something significant. There are other people at their camp, a white family, man, woman, and 2 small children. From what I could observe, these people are not with the gang willingly. They appear to be prisoners. This news changed everything. Standing Bear had been planning a swift, brutal attack that would end with all 6 gang members dead within minutes. But the presence of innocent captives meant they would need to be much more careful about their assault. They could not risk harming the prisoners in their desire for revenge. What is the family's condition? Standing Bear asked. They appear unharmed but frightened. The woman and children stay close together, and the man has his hands bound. The gang members treat them roughly but have not seriously hurt them yet. Standing Bear gathered his warriors around him and quickly explained the situation. The presence of captives would complicate their attack considerably, but it also provided an opportunity to save innocent lives while pursuing their revenge. His warriors listened intently, asking tactical questions and offering suggestions based on their extensive combat experience. We will attack at dawn, Standing Bear decided. Iron Hawk, take 5 men and position yourselves on the north side of the creek. Wait for my signal, then move in fast to secure the prisoners and get them to safety. The rest of us will hit the camp from the south. Our primary objective is to capture the gang members alive if possible. Black Elk looked surprised. Alive, War Chief? After what they did to your sister? Standing Bear's smile was cold and terrible. Yes, alive. I want them to understand exactly why they are dying before I kill them. I want them to know that they attacked the wrong woman, that their casual cruelty has consequences they never imagined. A quick death would be mercy, and mercy is something they will not receive from me. The warriors nodded their understanding. They had all seen Standing Bear's capacity for creative vengeance when dealing with enemies who had committed particularly heinous crimes. The gang members who had attacked Sarah were about to discover that there were fates much worse than a simple bullet or arrow in combat. As night fell, the war party moved into position around the gang's camp with the silent precision that had made Lakota warriors legendary across the frontier. Each man knew exactly where he needed to be and what his role would be in the coming attack. They were professionals, veterans of dozens of successful raids against cavalry patrols and civilian militias. Surrounding and capturing 6 overconfident outlaws would present no significant challenge. Standing Bear positioned himself where he could observe the entire camp throughout the night. He watched the gang members as they sat around their fire, drinking whiskey and joking among themselves with the casual cruelty of men who had never faced serious consequences for their actions. The family they had captured sat apart from the fire, huddled together for warmth and comfort. The children appeared to be very young, probably no more than 6 or 7 years old. The gang leader, the same scarred man who had beaten Sarah and ordered her trading post burned, was clearly the dominant figure in the group. The others deferred to him consistently, seeking his approval for decisions and laughing loudest at his crude jokes. Standing Bear studied this man carefully, memorizing his face and mannerisms. This was the person who had struck his sister down and left her to die. This was the man who would suffer most before the day ended. Just before dawn, as the first pale light began to appear on the eastern horizon, Standing Bear gave the signal for attack. His warriors moved like shadows, closing the distance to the camp in complete silence. The gang members were still asleep except for one man who should have been standing watch but had instead dozed off beside the dying fire. The attack was over almost before it began. Ironhawk and his team secured the prisoner family and moved them to safety while Standing Bear and the remaining warriors surrounded the sleeping outlaws. When the gang members woke up, it was to find themselves looking down the barrels of rifles and war lances, held by grim-faced warriors who clearly meant business. "Nobody move," Standing Bear commanded in perfect English. "You are surrounded and outgunned. Any man who reaches for a weapon dies immediately." The gang leader tried to sit up, his hand instinctively moving toward the pistol on his belt. Fast Elk's lance point touched his throat before he could complete the motion, and he froze in place. "You speak English pretty well for a savage," the leader said, trying to maintain his arrogant demeanor even in this desperate situation. "What do you want? We ain't got nothing worth taking." Standing Bear dismounted and walked slowly toward the man who had brutalized his sister. His warriors kept their weapons trained on the other gang members, ready to kill anyone who made a threatening move.
"My name is Standing Bear," he said quietly.
"I am a war chief of the Lakota people. 3 days ago, you and your men attacked a trading post 20 miles east of here. You robbed and destroyed the business of a woman named Sarah Mackenzie. You beat her unconscious and left her to die in the ruins of everything she had worked to build." The gang leader's expression changed slightly as he began to understand that this was not a random encounter with hostile Indians. "I don't know what you're talking about, Chief. We ain't been near no trading post." "Do not lie to me," Standing Bear said, his voice carrying a deadly certainty. "I have followed your trail for 3 days. My warriors have examined every track you left, every sign of your passage. We know exactly what you did and where you did it." He gestured toward the captive family, who were now being cared for by Ironhawk and his men. "And we can see that robbing trading posts and terrorizing innocent people is what you do for a living. How many other families have you destroyed? How many other people have you murdered?" The gang leader finally seemed to realize the full scope of his predicament. These were not random Indians looking for horses to steal or settlers to harass. These were professional warriors conducting a specific mission of revenge, and they clearly knew exactly what they were doing. "Look, Chief," he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "Maybe we did hit a trading post a few days back, but it was just business, nothing personal. The woman put up a fight, and things got out of hand. We didn't mean to hurt her bad." Standing Bear's expression did not change, but several of his warriors growled low in their throats at this casual admission of guilt. The gang leader had just signed his own death warrant, though he seemed to be too stupid to realize it. Sarah Mackenzie is my sister, Standing Bear said simply. The color drained from the gang leader's face as the full implications of this statement sank in. He looked around at the circle of armed warriors, seeing his own death reflected in their implacable expressions. His men were beginning to understand the situation as well, and several of them were starting to look genuinely frightened for the first time in years. "Your sister?" one of them stammered. "But she was white. You're Indians. She was adopted into our family when we were children." Standing Bear explained patiently. "She chose to return to the white world, but she remained under our protection. She was known to every Lakota band within 200 miles as our beloved sister. Harming her was the same as declaring war on our entire people." The gang members were now beginning to fully grasp the magnitude of their mistake. They had not simply robbed another isolated settler. They had attacked someone with powerful connections, someone whose injury would bring terrible retribution down upon them, and that retribution had found them. "Please, Chief," the gang leader said, his arrogance completely gone now. "We didn't know. If we'd known she was your sister, we never would have touched her. Let us go, and we'll never come back to this territory. You'll never see us again." Standing Bear considered this plea for mercy, his head tilted thoughtfully. "You are asking me to show you the same mercy you showed my sister when she begged you to leave her enough supplies to survive the winter. You want the same consideration you gave her when she offered to help you trade peacefully with local tribes." He paused, letting this comparison sink in. "Tell me, when my sister lay bleeding in the dirt with her life's work burning around her, did you feel any regret? Did you consider showing mercy to a helpless woman who had never done you any harm?" The gang leader said nothing, because they both knew the answer to that question. He had felt no regret and shown no mercy. He had beaten Sarah unconscious and ordered her trading post destroyed without a second thought. And now he wanted mercy for himself that he had refused to grant to an innocent woman. "I see," Standing Bear said when no answer came. "You felt nothing. You showed nothing. You gave nothing." His voice hardened. "Then that is exactly what you will receive from me." He turned to address his warriors. "Secure all their weapons and prepare to move out. We have a long journey ahead of us, and I want to reach a more suitable location before we begin the real business of this day." The gang members were quickly disarmed and their hands bound with rawhide thongs. Ironhawk approached Standing Bear with a report on the condition of the rescued family. "The family is unharmed but shaken," he said. "The man's name is Thomas Crawford. He says the gang attacked his homestead yesterday and took them prisoner. They were planning to demand ransom from his brother, who owns a bank in Deadwood." Standing Bear nodded. "Get them mounted and ready to travel. We'll escort them to safety before we deal with our other business." As the war party prepared to move out, the gang leader made one last desperate attempt to bargain for his life. "Chief, wait. I got money hidden. A lot of money. Enough to buy your sister a whole new trading post better than what she had before. Let us go, and I'll tell you where it is." Standing Bear looked down at this pathetic man who still thought everything could be solved with money, who believed that wealth could somehow compensate for the suffering he had caused. "My sister nearly died because of your greed. You destroyed something beautiful that she had spent years creating, and you think money will fix what you have broken?" He shook his head in disgust. "You understand nothing about honor, about justice, about the sacred bonds between family members. You are less than nothing, and nothing is what you will receive from me." The gang was loaded onto their horses with their hands tied and their feet secured to the stirrups. They would travel as captives, completely at the mercy of warriors who had no intention of showing them any mercy at all. As the party moved out across the prairie, heading toward a remote canyon where Standing Bear intended to carry out his vengeance in private, the gang members finally began to understand that they were not going to escape this situation alive. They had made the worst mistake of their criminal careers. They had attacked the wrong woman. And now they were about to pay a price beyond anything their worst nightmares had ever shown them. The journey to what Standing Bear privately called the Canyon of Justice took the better part of 2 days, with the war party moving steadily through increasingly remote and rugged terrain. They first escorted the Crawford family to a cavalry outpost near Deadwood, where Thomas Crawford tearfully thanked his rescuers and promised to spread word of their honorable conduct to anyone who would listen. The soldiers at the outpost were suspicious of the heavily armed Lakota warriors, but could hardly argue with men who had just rescued white civilians from a gang of murderers. After leaving the family in safety, Standing Bear led his warriors and their captives deep into the Badlands, following ancient trails known only to his people. The landscape grew increasingly desolate and forbidding, with towering rock formations and deep canyons that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. It was a place where screams would echo forever against stone walls, where the bones of enemies could bleach white under the merciless sun, where justice could be administered without interference from cavalry patrols or territorial marshals. The gang members grew increasingly terrified as they traveled deeper into this harsh wilderness. They had heard stories about what Indians did to prisoners, tales of torture and mutilation that had grown more horrific with each telling around frontier campfires. They had never given much thought to these stories when they were the ones inflicting suffering on helpless victims, but now they found themselves imagining every possible form of agony that might await them in the remote canyon, toward which they were being inexorably driven. Standing Bear chose his destination carefully. The canyon was a sacred place to his people, a natural amphitheater where important ceremonies were sometimes conducted, and where the spirits of ancestors were said to gather to witness acts of justice. Steep walls rose 200 feet on all sides, creating a natural prison from which no escape was possible. A small stream provided fresh water, and scattered patches of grass would feed the horses during their stay. It was the perfect place for what Standing Bear intended to accomplish. As they made camp in the canyon on the second evening, the gang leader made another desperate attempt to negotiate for his life. "Chief, you're making a big mistake here. You kill us, and the army's going to come looking for us. We got friends who know where we went. This is going to bring a lot of trouble down on your people." Standing Bear was building a small fire in the center of the canyon floor, taking his time to arrange the kindling exactly as he wanted it. He did not look up when the gang leader spoke, but his warriors could see the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated growing anger. "Tell me about these friends," Standing Bear said calmly, still focused on his fire. "Are they the same kind of men you are? Murderers and thieves who prey on innocent families?" "They're businessmen," the gang leader insisted. "Legitimate businessmen who won't take kindly to their associates being killed by a bunch of savages." This time Standing Bear did look up, and his expression made the gang leader immediately regret his choice of words. "Businessmen," Standing Bear repeated thoughtfully. "Is that what you call yourselves?" "Business associates who conduct trade by beating women unconscious and burning down their stores." He stood up slowly, his full height and muscular frame suddenly seeming much more imposing in the flickering firelight. "Let me tell you about my business, white man. My business is protecting my family and my people from animals like you. My business is making sure that when someone hurts those under my protection, they suffer consequences they will never forget. My business is teaching lessons that other predators will remember when they think about attacking the innocent." The gang leader tried to back away, but his bound hands and hobbled feet made movement awkward and painful. "Look, Chief, we can work something out here. Whatever you want, we can arrange it." "Money, information about other gangs, safe passage through Indian territory. We can make a deal." "You still do not understand," Standing Bear said with what might have been pity in his voice. "This is not a negotiation. This is not business. This is justice. Sacred justice that demands payment in blood for the blood you spilled." He gestured towards his warriors, who were now arranged in a semicircle around the fire, their faces painted for war in traditional patterns of red and black. "These men are not here to witness a bargaining session. They are here to witness an execution. The only question remaining is whether that execution will be quick or slow." Iron Hawk stepped forward, carrying several items that made the gang members' blood run cold. Knives of various sizes, thin wooden stakes, strips of rawhide, small metal tools whose purpose was unclear but undoubtedly sinister. He arranged these implements carefully on a flat rock beside the fire, creating a display that spoke eloquently of prolonged suffering. "In our culture," Standing Bear continued conversationally, "justice must be proportional to the crime committed. A man who steals a horse might lose a finger. A man who kills in battle dies with honor, but a man who makes war on helpless women and children, who destroys what others have built through honest work, who takes pleasure in causing suffering to the innocent, such a man must die in a way that balances the scales of justice." He picked up one of the knives, testing its edge with his thumb. A thin line of blood appeared, demonstrating the blade's sharpness. "My sister lay in the dirt for hours, bleeding from a head wound that could have killed her, watching everything she had worked for burn to ashes. She felt helpless, terrified, abandoned by a world that seemed to offer no protection for decent people trying to build something good." Standing Bear's voice remained calm, but his warriors could hear the controlled fury beneath his words. "Tonight you will experience those same feelings. You will understand what it means to be completely helpless, to face suffering with no hope of rescue, to realize that your actions have consequences you never imagined." The fat gang member who had joked about taking Sarah with them began to weep openly. "Please, Chief, I never wanted to hurt your sister. It was all his idea, he said, pointing desperately at their leader. I just followed orders. I never touched her. Standing Bear studied this man with cold interest. You never touched her, but you stood by and watched while she was beaten. You helped load stolen goods from her store. You laughed when your leader ordered her trading post burned. You are just as guilty as the man who swung the weapon. But I didn't hit her, the fat man protested. I ain't never killed nobody. Haven't you? Standing Bear asked. What about the Crawford family? If we had not found them, what would have happened to those children when you finished extracting ransom from their uncle? Did you plan to let them live after they had seen your faces? The fat man's silence was answer enough. These were not men who left witnesses to their crimes. The Crawford children would have died as soon as their uncle's money was safely in the gang's possession, killed as casually as someone might swat a fly. Standing Bear nodded thoughtfully. I see that you understand my point. You have killed many people, directly or indirectly. Men, women, children. It made no difference to you, as long as you got what you wanted. Tonight, you will pay for all of them. Over the next several hours, Standing Bear and his warriors conducted a ceremony of justice that followed ancient traditions dating back generations. Each gang member was questioned extensively about his crimes, forced to confess in detail to every act of violence and theft he had committed. The warriors listened to these confessions with growing anger, learning about innocent families murdered, women violated, children orphaned by the gang's casual brutality. The gang leader proved to be the worst of them all. Understanding Bear's relentless questioning, he admitted to killing at least 30 people during his criminal career, including several women and children. He had burned homesteads, stolen life savings from poor families, and sold kidnapped women to brothels in lawless mining towns. He was not just a murderer, but an architect of misery who had left a trail of suffering across hundreds of miles of frontier territory. 30 people, Standing Bear mused as he heated the tip of a metal rod in the fire. 30 families destroyed. Hundreds of relatives and friends left to mourn, and you feel no remorse for any of it. Why should I? The gang leader snarled, his earlier fear now replaced by defiant anger. This country's got no law except what a man can enforce with his gun. I took what I wanted because I was strong enough to take it. That's the way the world works, Chief. The strong prey on the weak, and the weak die. Standing Bear nodded as if this philosophy made perfect sense to him. You are right about one thing. The strong do prey on the weak, but you made a crucial error in your understanding of the world. He withdrew the glowing metal rod from the fire and held it close to the gang leader's face, close enough that the man could feel the heat radiating from its tip. You thought you were strong. You thought a woman alone with no protection was weak, but you never considered that the woman might have a brother who commands 300 of the finest warriors on the Great Plains. The gang leader's eyes went wide as he realized what was about to happen to him. No, wait, you can't. His scream echoed off the canyon walls as the hot metal touched his skin, a sound of agony that seemed to go on forever before finally fading into ragged gasps. Standing Bear waited patiently for the man to recover enough to understand what was happening to him. That was for my sister's pain, Standing Bear said calmly. Now we will discuss payment for the 30 people you murdered. What followed was a night of justice that the canyon walls would remember long after the last echo of screaming had faded away. Standing Bear was methodical and precise in his work, ensuring that each gang member experienced a level of suffering proportional to the crimes he had committed. The fat man who had claimed innocence was the first to break completely, sobbing out confessions to crimes that Standing Bear had not even asked about. The others followed suit, each man desperate to bargain for mercy that would never come. Iron Hawk and the other warriors participated in the ceremony, each man taking a turn to exact payment for the innocent blood that had been spilled. They worked with the calm professionalism of experienced executioners, men who understood that what they were doing was not cruelty but justice. Each cut, each burn, each moment of agony was carefully calculated to balance the scales that had been so badly tipped by the gang's crimes. As dawn began to break over the canyon rim, painting the stone walls with pale morning light, the gang leader was still alive but barely recognizable as human. Standing Bear had saved him for last, ensuring that he witnessed the death of each of his followers before facing his own final judgment. Are you ready to die now? Standing Bear asked quietly. The gang leader could only nod, no longer capable of speech. The night had taught him lessons about pain and justice that he would carry with him into whatever afterlife awaited men like him. He had learned what it felt like to be completely helpless, to face suffering with no hope of rescue. to understand that actions have consequences. Standing Bear picked up his knife one final time, its blade gleaming in the early morning light. "This is for Sarah Mackenzie," he said. "This is for every innocent person you killed. This is so the spirits of your victims can finally rest in peace." The gang leader's death was swift and clean, more mercy than he deserved. But Standing Bear was not a cruel man. Justice had been served, the scales had been balanced, and the debt had been paid in full. As the sun rose fully above the canyon rim, Standing Bear and his warriors performed a cleansing ceremony to purify themselves after their night's work. They had done what was necessary, what honor and justice demanded, but they took no pleasure in the suffering they had inflicted. They were not sadists or torturers, but instruments of cosmic justice, men who understood that sometimes terrible things must be done to protect the innocent. The bodies of the gang members would remain in the canyon, food for buzzards and coyotes, their bones eventually bleaching white under the desert sun. No markers would commemorate their existence, no mourners would grieve for their deaths. They had lived as animals and died as animals, leaving nothing behind but the memory of their crimes. Standing Bear looked up at the brightening sky and felt a deep satisfaction settle in his chest. His sister had been avenged, her attackers had paid the ultimate price for their crimes, and other potential predators would think twice before targeting the innocent. The message would spread across the frontier like wildfire. Some people were not to be touched, some lines were not to be crossed, and some families had the power to exact terrible vengeance on those who wronged them. Justice had been served in the Canyon of Justice, and the world was a slightly safer place for decent people trying to build something good in the midst of chaos and violence. The journey back to Sarah's destroyed trading post took Standing Bear and his warriors 4 days, traveling at a more leisurely pace than their desperate pursuit had demanded. The weight of completed justice rode easily on their shoulders, but each man carried private thoughts about what they had witnessed in the canyon and what it meant for the future of their people's relationship with the white world. Standing Bear found himself thinking not just about the vengeance he had exacted, but about the larger implications of what had happened. The gang's attack on Sarah had been more than just a random act of criminal violence. It was symptomatic of the chaos that was engulfing the frontier as white settlers, gold miners, cavalry units, and Native American tribes all competed for control of the same territory. His sister's trading post had represented something rare and precious, a place where different peoples could meet peacefully, conduct honest business, and find common ground despite their cultural differences. When they finally reached the site where the Mackenzie trading post had once stood, Standing Bear was relieved to see that Sarah had recovered enough strength to be up and moving around. Quick Knife and the warriors who had remained behind to protect her had done their work well. Her head wound was healing cleanly, and though she still moved carefully and tired easily, the immediate danger to her life had passed. Sarah embraced her brother when she saw him approaching, tears streaming down her face as she read the completion of his mission in his expression. She did not need to ask what had happened to the men who had attacked her. Standing Bear's eyes told her everything she needed to know about justice served and debts paid in full. "It's over," she whispered against his chest. "Thank God, it's over." Standing Bear held his sister tightly, feeling the fierce protectiveness that had driven him across hundreds of miles of dangerous territory. "It's over," he confirmed. "They will never hurt anyone again. And word will spread about what happened to them. Other predators will think twice before targeting innocent people in this territory." As they stood together among the charred ruins of everything Sarah had worked to build, the full scope of the challenge ahead became clear. The trading post was completely destroyed, her inventory was gone, her customer base was scattered, and winter was approaching with alarming speed. Rebuilding from nothing would require resources, time, and tremendous determination. But Sarah Mackenzie had never been one to surrender in the face of adversity, and she was not alone in this fight. Standing Bear had already begun formulating plans to help his sister rebuild something even better than what she had lost. "I have been thinking," he said as they surveyed the destruction together. "Maybe this is an opportunity to create something new, something better than what was here before." Sarah looked at him questioningly, wondering what he could possibly mean. The trading post had been her life's work, the culmination of years of careful planning and backbreaking labor. How could its destruction be considered an opportunity? Standing Bear gestured toward the open prairie surrounding them. "Your old trading post served individual customers who happened to pass through this area. But what if we built something bigger? What if we created a permanent marketplace where different tribes could meet regularly to trade with each other and with white merchants? A place large enough to host seasonal gatherings, protected enough to be safe from raiders, prosperous enough to attract the best traders from hundreds of miles around, The vision he described began to take shape in Sarah's imagination. Instead of a simple trading post, they could build a genuine commercial center, complete with multiple buildings, permanent storage facilities, guest quarters for visiting traders, and even a small fort for protection. It would be ambitious beyond anything she had previously attempted, but it would also be virtually impossible for any future gang of raiders to destroy completely. That would require enormous amounts of money and labor, Sarah said practically. More than I could possibly afford or organize on my own. Standing Bear smiled. You would not be doing it on your own. I have discussed this idea with the tribal councils of 6 different bands. They are all interested in having a permanent, secure place to conduct trade. They would contribute labor, materials, and ongoing protection in exchange for priority access to the best trading opportunities. He pointed toward different areas around the ruined trading post as he continued explaining his vision. The main marketplace would go there, with separate buildings for different types of goods. Living quarters for permanent staff would be over there, positioned to provide good views of the surrounding countryside. Storage buildings would be built partially underground for protection against both weather and raiders. And over there, he indicated a slight rise to the east, we would build a proper fort with walls thick enough to stop rifle bullets. Sarah found herself getting excited despite her exhaustion and grief. The plan Standing Bear was describing would indeed be far superior to anything she had built before. It would also be much more defensible, much more profitable, and much more likely to survive the continuing violence that plagued the frontier. How long would such a project take? She asked. 2 years, maybe 3, depending on weather and other complications. But we would have basic trading operations up and running within a few months. You would not lose any more business than necessary. Over the next several days, as Sarah continued recovering from her injuries and Standing Bear's warriors maintained security around the area, they developed the plan in greater detail. Representatives from various tribal bands arrived to examine the proposed site and contribute their own ideas to the project. White traders who had done business with Sarah in the past sent word that they would support the new enterprise with both financial backing and ongoing commercial relationships. The response was overwhelmingly positive from all parties involved. Everyone recognized that the frontier needed places where honest business could be conducted safely, where different cultures could interact peacefully, where prosperity could be built through cooperation rather than violence. Sarah's attack had actually galvanized support for exactly the kind of institution she had always tried to create. Ironhawk proved to be particularly enthusiastic about the construction aspects of the project. As a young man, he had worked with army engineers on several building projects and had learned techniques for creating structures that could withstand both natural disasters and military attacks. He volunteered to oversee the construction crews and ensure that everything was built to the highest possible standards. We will use the finest materials available, he promised Sarah. Stone foundations, thick timber walls, proper drainage, secure storage areas, everything designed to last for generations. This will not be something that 6 men with matches can destroy in a single afternoon. The financial arrangements proved surprisingly straightforward. Several successful white merchants agreed to provide initial funding in exchange for long-term trading privileges. The participating tribes would contribute labor, raw materials, and security services in exchange for reduced trading fees and priority access to scarce goods. Sarah would manage day-to-day operations and receive a percentage of all profits generated by the facility. Construction began within 2 weeks of Sarah's attack, with work crews arriving daily to begin the massive undertaking. The site was transformed into a bustling hive of activity as foundations were dug, timber was cut and shaped, and stone was quarried from nearby outcroppings. Workers from a dozen different tribes labored alongside white carpenters and stonemasons, creating something unprecedented on the Great Plains. Standing Bear divided his time between overseeing security for the construction project and handling his regular duties as a war chief. The success of his mission to avenge Sarah had enhanced his reputation among the Lakota bands, and many young warriors sought him out for advice on tactics and leadership. He used these opportunities to spread word about the new trading center, encouraging cooperation between tribes and promoting the idea that prosperity through trade was superior to wealth gained through raiding. As autumn turned to winter and the first buildings began to take shape, Sarah started to realize that her brother had given her something far more valuable than revenge against the men who had attacked her. He had given her a chance to build something truly significant, something that could serve as a model for peaceful coexistence between different peoples in an increasingly violent world. The new trading center, which Sarah decided to name Peace River Market after the small stream that ran through the property, officially opened for business in the spring of 1877. The grand opening was attended by representatives from more than 20 different tribes, dozens of white merchants, territorial officials, and even a few cavalry officers, who recognized the value of having a stable commercial center in their area of responsibility. Standing Bear delivered the opening ceremony's main address, speaking in both Lakota and English to the diverse crowd that had gathered for the historic occasion. His words were carefully chosen to honor the memory of what had been destroyed while celebrating the promise of what was being created. My sister Sarah Mackenzie built the first trading post on this site with her own hands, driven by a vision of people from different worlds working together for mutual benefit, he said. Evil men tried to destroy that vision with violence and cruelty, but they succeeded only in making it stronger. Today we open not just a new trading center, but a new model for how different peoples can build prosperity together instead of destroying each other through endless conflict. He gestured toward the impressive complex of buildings that now occupied the site where Sarah's simple trading post had once stood. This place exists because good people chose cooperation over conflict, because communities chose to invest in shared prosperity rather than individual gain, because justice was served on those who thought they could destroy what others had built through honest work.
The crowd erupted in cheers as Sarah stepped forward to officially declare Peace River Market open for business.
The first transactions were ceremonial. Trade goods exchanged between tribal leaders and white merchants as symbols of the peaceful relationships that the new facility was intended to foster. But within hours, serious commercial activity was underway, with traders conducting business that would have been impossible before the creation of this neutral meeting ground. Over the following months, Peace River Market exceeded even Standing Bear's optimistic projections for success. The facility attracted customers from as far away as Canada and Mexico, drawn by the unique combination of security, variety, and fair dealing that characterized all transactions conducted there. The complex expanded several times during its first year of operation, with new buildings added to accommodate growing demand. More importantly, the trading center began to serve as a model for similar ventures throughout the frontier. Other entrepreneurs, inspired by Sarah's success, began establishing their own cooperative trading posts in strategic locations. A network of peaceful commercial relationships began to develop, creating alternatives to the cycle of raid and revenge that had characterized frontier life for so many years. Standing Bear found deep satisfaction in watching his sister's dream grow beyond anything either of them had originally imagined. The attack that had nearly destroyed her life had ultimately led to the creation of something far more significant than a simple trading post. Peace River Market had become a symbol of what was possible when people chose cooperation over conflict, when justice was served swiftly and completely, when communities came together to build rather than destroy. Sarah, for her part, discovered that surviving the attack had given her a new perspective on what was truly important in life. She had lost possessions and profits, but she had gained something much more valuable: the knowledge that she was not alone in the world, that her family and friends would move heaven and earth to protect her, and that justice would always triumph over cruelty in the end. On quiet evenings, when the day's trading was done and the market was settling into peaceful rest, Sarah would sometimes walk to the small memorial she had erected near the site of her original trading post. The memorial honored all the innocent victims of frontier violence, including the unnamed families that the gang had murdered before making the fatal mistake of attacking her. Standing beside that memorial, looking out over the bustling commercial center that had grown from the ashes of destruction, Sarah would remember the words her brother had spoken during the opening ceremony. Evil men had tried to destroy her vision with violence and cruelty, but they had succeeded only in making it stronger. The thugs who had destroyed her trading post and left her to die had indeed made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated not just her connections, but the power of communities to respond to injustice with overwhelming force. They had learned in their final moments that some families could not be intimidated, some bonds could not be broken, and some acts of violence would bring down consequences beyond anything they had ever imagined. Justice had been served, prosperity had been restored, and the frontier was a safer place for decent people trying to build something good in the midst of chaos. The Mackenzie family had won far more than revenge. They had won the future.